I thought I knew what love was. I thought I had it all figured out. Jonathan Blake was perfect. He was smart, kind, successful. Everything I'd ever wanted. The kind of man I could imagine growing old with. Our engagement was a dream come true, and when he proposed, under the starlit sky, it felt like my entire life had fallen into place. The diamond he placed on my finger sparkled like the future we were going to build together. But dreams have a way of turning into nightmares. It was the week before our wedding, a time when I should have been picking out decorations or finalizing our guest list. Instead, I found myself walking into a scene that would shatter everything. The soft glow of candles flickered in the corner. The sound of laughter filled the air. And there, in the center of it all, was Jonathan, his hand resting on her waist. My sister, Clarissa. She was wearing my robe, the one I'd left hanging, on the bathroom door earlier that day. They didn't even try to hide it. Jonathan looked at me, his eyes wide, but there was no apology, no remorse, just a hollow excuse. It just happened. And in that moment, my world fell apart. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I just stood there, frozen, watching the love of my life hold the one person who had always envied everything I had, everything I was. I was no longer the bride-to-be. I was the fool, the one they both betrayed. What do you do when everything you believed in is suddenly a lie? I tried to tell them. I tried to make them see what I saw. But no one believed me. Rebecca, you're being dramatic. That's what my mom said, as if I was imagining the look on Clarissa's face when she saw me standing in the doorway. As if I didn't feel the weight of Jonathan's guilt pressing on me. I never thought she'd go this far. Clarissa always wanted what I had. My clothes, my room, my life. But I never thought she'd take him, my fiancé, the one person I trusted more than anyone else. And yet there she was, holding him like he belonged to her, like she was the one he was supposed to marry. Months passed, and they tied the knot. A whirlwind wedding I wasn't invited to. A life I wasn't a part of anymore. Jonathan, now her, husband, acted as though nothing had happened. No apologies, no explanations. Just silence, like the whole thing had never even occurred. I became the outsider, the one who was too much, too emotional, too dramatic. I couldn't stay in that place. I couldn't live in a world where I was the fool. So, I left. Left my hometown. Left my family. Left everything I knew behind. I moved to a city where no one knew my name, where no one would look at me and see weakness. I built a new life from the ground up, brick by painful brick, on my own terms, alone. At first, it was painful. I cried at night, alone in my new apartment, missing the life I thought I would have. But the pain slowly faded. I started to find peace in solitude, to learn how to be okay with me again. No one could betray me here. For a while, I didn't believe I would ever feel whole again. I was convinced that I'd never escape the shadow of what had happened, that betrayal would always be the lens through which I saw the world. But time has a way of mending wounds, even the ones you think will never heal. It's like building a fire from the tiniest spark. You have to start somewhere, even if it feels impossible. I found a new routine in the city. I got a job that kept my hands busy and my mind occupied. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't need to be. I learned to love the quiet of my apartment. No one trying to tell me how I should feel or what I should do. No one asking me to forgive what had broken me. It was mine. A space where I could just breathe. But the thing about solitude is, it's a double-edged sword. It can heal, but it can also make you feel like you're fading into nothing. I had to force myself to step out, to make new connections, even when every part of me wanted to retreat into my cocoon. Then one day, in a tiny cafe downtown, I met Elias Monroe. He wasn't like anyone I'd ever met before. Quiet, intense, and there was something about him that felt different. Like he had seen the worst parts of life and had somehow managed to find peace within them. He wasn't flashy, didn't care about the typical billionaire image. I learned later he didn't even want to be seen in the spotlight. And he didn't push. He didn't try to fix me. He just was present, grounded, and real. We started talking. At first about nothing, then about everything. And over time, I realized I was healing. It wasn't immediate, but with him, I felt safe. For the first time in years, I wasn't alone. I never thought I'd be ready for love again. But sometimes, life has other plans. The first time I saw Elias Monroe, I didn't know his name. I didn't know anything about him except that he was sitting alone at a small table, reading a book with an intensity that made everything else around him fade into the background. It's funny how sometimes you meet someone and you just know it's not love at first sight, but there's an unmistakable pull, a quiet connection that feels almost like fate whispering in your ear. He wasn't handsome in the way that people expect billionaires to be. He didn't have the flashy smile or the polished look of someone trying to impress. Instead, there was a quiet depth to him, a seriousness in his eyes, like he carried the weight of the world but wore it effortlessly. I noticed him right away, though I tried not to. I didn't need anyone else to disrupt the fragile peace I'd built around myself. But then, as if by chance, he looked up from his book and our eyes met. There was no awkwardness, no forced conversation, just a simple acknowledgement of shared space. He smiled, and for some reason it felt real, like it wasn't for show. "I see you're reading Moby Dick," I said, a random comment that I immediately regretted. I had nothing else to say. "Yeah," he said, looking at me like I was a curiosity. "I don't usually get the chance to read much anymore, so when I do, it's something heavy." I laughed, surprised by his openness. We talked for a few minutes, about books, about life, about the kind of mundane things that allow you to slip past the walls you've built up. And before I knew it, I found myself looking forward to our conversations. He didn't try to fix me. He didn't ask me about Jonathan or Clarissa or what I had gone through. He respected that I was still healing, but he didn't treat me like a fragile glass figure. With Elias, I was just me. It was slow. It was quiet. But I felt myself coming alive again, like I had been dormant for so long, and now something was stirring. Elias and I didn't have the kind of love story that makes the front pages of magazines or gets shared in sappy Instagram posts. Ours was quieter, more subtle, but it was exactly what I needed. After months of spending time together, of finding comfort in his company, we decided to marry. Not because we had to, but because it felt right. We didn't need the big ceremony, or the guests who would fawn over every detail. We didn't want the whispers of what our lives would become. We just wanted to live them. So we had a small, private ceremony in a park by the lake. Just the two of us, the officiant, and a few close friends who had no interest in making our love public property. I still remember standing there in that quiet park, Elias beside me, his hand in mine, and I thought, this is peace. There was no rush, no frenzy of wedding planning to keep up with. No need to perform for anyone. We said our vows to each other, in our own words. There was no audience to applaud, no one to judge. Just us, promising to walk this path together, silently and steadily. In a way, that was the most beautiful part. We didn't need anyone's approval. We didn't need to prove anything. It was just us, sharing our quiet love in the most intimate, understated way possible. It wasn't perfect. Love never is. But it was real. It was ours. And that's all I wanted. It was in those moments that I realized I had healed, not because I had forgotten the pain, but because I had found someone who respected that pain. Someone who loved me without the expectation that I would ever be fixed. And in Elias, I found more than just a husband. I found my peace. The news came like a blow to the chest, unexpected and uninvited. My mother had passed away suddenly. A stroke, they said. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd spoken to her. Life had moved on without me, and I'd let it. My relationship with her had always been complicated, filled with quiet judgments and unspoken resentments. But even so, I didn't expect to feel the weight of her absence so heavily. I hadn't planned on coming back to my hometown, the place where I'd once been so sure of myself, so sure of my life. The place where Jonathan and Clarissa had ruined everything, leaving me to pick up the pieces. But here I was, standing in front of my mother's house again, the walls familiar but distant. Elias stood beside me, his presence grounding me in a way that nothing else could. He had a calmness about him that I needed, especially now. He didn't say much, but his hand on my back was enough. He didn't ask questions or offer sympathy I didn't want. He just was. The funeral was a blur of faces, many of whom I hadn't seen in years. The hollow conversations, the awkward glances, the air of expectation that I should be grieving in a way that matched what everyone else felt. It was suffocating. But Elias didn't force me to talk. He just stayed by my side, a quiet anchor in a storm of emotions I wasn't ready to deal with. And then, as if the universe had decided to add one more cruel twist to this already painful chapter, Clarissa showed up. I didn't expect her to be there. I hadn't even thought about her, to be honest, but there she was, standing in the back of the room, her eyes searching, until they landed on me. And just as quickly, they shifted to Elias. The color drained from her face, and for the first time in years, I saw her falter. She wasn't the golden child anymore. She wasn't the one everyone looked to for approval or admiration. No, in that moment, she was just another woman who had stolen too much from me. And now, she stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. It felt good to see her like that, to know that she too could be rattled. To know that she wasn't untouchable. The room grew still as Clarissa walked in. The soft murmur of hushed conversations stopped as if someone had pressed the pause button on time. My heart thudded in, my chest, a strange mix of shock and something close to satisfaction. There she was. The woman who had taken everything I thought was mine. The woman who had married the man I once believed was my soulmate. The one who had shattered my world, only to walk away as though nothing had happened. Now, she stood in front of me, looking at Elias, her expression frozen, her lips parted in disbelief. I didn't need to say anything. Her eyes said it all. The horror, the realization, the recognition. That's Elias Monroe. Her voice was barely a whisper, trembling with shock. Her gaze never left him, as though she couldn't comprehend what she was seeing. She couldn't look at me. Not yet. She couldn't even bring herself to acknowledge my presence. All her attention was on Elias, as though he was the reason for the earth-shattering silence that had just swept through the room. And maybe he was. Elias didn't seem to notice the weight of the moment. He was calm, as always, his demeanor unaffected. He stood next to me with an ease that contrasted with the storm swirling around us. He didn't move, didn't speak. He just stood there, the quiet strength I had come to depend on. But the silence between us spoke volumes. I could almost hear the gears turning in Clarissa's head. She knew. She understood now. Elias wasn't just the man I had married. He wasn't just the quiet billionaire I had built a life with. He was the one who had quietly pulled the rug out from under Jonathan and Clarissa's empire, and now she was staring at the result. For the first time in years, I saw her falter. The golden child, the one who always took whatever she wanted, stood there frozen. Her expression was a mixture of confusion, guilt, and something I couldn't quite name. Fear, maybe. And all I could do was smile softly to myself. The tension in the room was palpable, a thick silence hanging over us. Clarissa, her face ghostly pale, couldn't look away from Elias. She didn't even seem to notice the eyes of the room on her. All the old, familiar emotions flooded back. The betrayal, the humiliation, the anger. But they didn't hurt anymore. They had faded, left behind by time, and in their place was something more powerful. Something I couldn't quite name. I glanced at Elias, who remained unfazed by Clarissa's shock. It wasn't that he didn't care, it was that he had already seen it all. He had dealt with bigger storms than this. He didn't flinch. Clarissa opened her mouth, trying to find words, but nothing came out. I could tell she was searching for some explanation, some way to pull herself back into control. But there was no control left for her. Not now. Clarissa, meet my husband. My voice was steady, calm, and it felt like the weight of those words was more powerful than anything I had ever said before. I looked her in the eyes, my gaze unwavering. This is Elias Monroe. Elias. The silent, hidden force behind it all. He wasn't just a quiet billionaire. He wasn't just a man who had come into my life and healed my wounds. He was the one who had quietly, strategically, and ruthlessly taken control of everything Jonathan and Clarissa had relied on. The company they had once built together, gone. Piece by piece, Elias had bought out their holdings, secured his place as the silent investor, and watched from the shadows as their empire crumbled. Jonathan had been blinded by his greed, just like Clarissa had been blinded by her desire to have everything. But Elias had outsmarted them both. He had played the long game, and in the end, it wasn't just about the money or the business. It was about control. It was about justice. Clarissa, still frozen, had no words. There was nothing left for her to say. She had tried to steal my fiancé, tried to take my life. But now, standing next to Elias, I knew I had something she could never have peace. Clarissa stood there, motionless, her eyes fixed on Elias like she had seen a ghost. She blinked a few times, her lips trembling, but no words came out. The room around us felt like it had vanished, leaving only her and me and the weight of everything that had happened in the past 6 years. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on us, watching this silent confrontation unfold. My mom's absence was like a ghost hanging in the air, and it hit me suddenly. I didn't need her to validate my pain anymore. Elias and I had built a life, and we had built it together. That was all that mattered now. Elias, still calm, didn't look at Clarissa. He didn't need to. He was a man of few words, but his presence spoke louder than anything she could ever say. He didn't have to explain himself or justify his actions. His eyes were focused on me, his hand brushing mine as if to remind me we were in this together. But this was her moment, her realization. Clarissa opened her mouth again, but her words were strangled, swallowed by the weight of her own guilt. I didn't... She stopped, unable to finish, as if she were seeing the entire web of lies unraveling before her. He was just... No, I interrupted, my voice gentle but firm. No excuses, Clarissa. It's too late for that. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile of satisfaction. It was the smile of someone who had finally freed themselves from the weight of years of betrayal. You've lost everything, just like you always wanted. But this time, you can't take it from me. Her shoulders slumped. She looked around, almost as if hoping someone, anyone, would come to her rescue, but no one did. The room stayed silent, a quiet, unspoken acknowledgement of her fall from grace. She tried to meet my eyes, but there was no longer any confidence there. She had always been the golden child, the one everyone admired, but now she was the one standing on the outside, looking in, the one who had tried to take everything I had, and failed. For the first time in her life, she had nothing left to steal. Nothing left to take. I could have said more. I could have told her exactly what I thought of her, of the years I spent feeling betrayed and alone. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I realized something. I was done. Done with the drama. Done with the games. Done with trying to prove I was worthy of something. I had built my own life, my own happiness, and I didn't need to rub her face in it. What she needed to see wasn't my anger. It was my peace. There was a quiet tension in the air, like everything had reached its inevitable end. Clarissa stood there, a shell of the woman she once was, her pride broken and her power gone. Her hands were shaking, but her face was a mask of resignation. She had nothing left to take. The truth had stripped her bare, and now she was nothing, more than a woman who had tried to destroy everything in her path, and failed. The room was still. I watched her, not with hatred or anger, but with a quiet strength I never knew I had. For the first time in my life, I understood something. I didn't need to win, because winning wasn't about proving anything to her. It wasn't about making her see how much she had taken from me. It was about realizing that in the end, I had the one thing she would never have: peace. I had built a life without her, without Jonathan, without the bitterness of betrayal. And I had done it on my own terms. I had healed, and no one could take that from me. Elias stood by my side, as always, silent but steadfast. His calm presence was everything I needed in that moment. He hadn't fought this battle for me. He had fought it with me, and that made all the difference. I wasn't alone anymore. I wasn't the scared, heartbroken woman I had once been. I was someone stronger, someone who had learned to survive and thrive in spite of the people who had tried to break me. Clarissa didn't move, didn't speak. She didn't have the words. And maybe, for once, she didn't know how to steal something that wasn't hers. Took a deep breath and stepped closer to Elias. He squeezed my hand, the way he always did when everything felt like it was about to break. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the weight of my past finally lift. I wasn't haunted by what I had lost anymore. I wasn't haunted by the betrayal. What I had gained, what I had built with Elias, was more than I could have ever dreamed of. And no one, least of all Clarissa, could take that from me. As we turned to leave, I heard a whisper, a soft murmur that followed us out the door. But it didn't matter, because I had already won, and nothing could ever take that away.